Okay, hello. Today we're talking about NAD+, sometimes referred to as the molecule of youth. Now, this is the compound that many rich and famous people go to clinics to get IV'd straight into their veins to basically keep them young. The benefits of this compound include cognitive performance, physical performance, fat loss, energy levels, all of these things being improved. And even more cool, and something I'm very passionate about, is the improvements in warding off and reversal of neurodegenerative diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's. If you want more information on that, watch this video. But for now, let's look at how can we get these benefits, us normal people. And what's really cool is we can do it without actually taking NAD+. So we're going to look at the pathways in which the body synthesizes NAD+, the pathways in which it recycles NAD+, and where supplements and modalities feed into that so that you can feel your best and perform your best. So let's begin at the beginning with something called the de novo pathway. De novo comes from the Latin meaning anew or from the beginning. As it suggests, this is synthesizing NAD+ from fresh. There's a lot going on the board here, but there's only a couple of things we need to take away from it. It occurs in the liver, which means that if your liver's buggered, you're going to really struggle to do this, so look after yourself. Another thing is if you're generally inflamed, this is also going to be a difficult pathway to go through. In fact, a lot of the issues with disease and decreased energy levels is the fact that a lot of these pathways get inhibited under inflammation. We're going to discuss in more detail later how you can actually avoid that. But for now, let's focus on this. It is a multi-step process in which the amino acid tryptophan is converted to NAD+. Again, don't need to understand it all. All we really need to understand here is that you need adequate protein intake. Tryptophan is an amino acid, so if you have enough protein, you're basically going to be sorted. Now, you can also supplement with tryptophan, and you can see here that you can buy it from iHerb, but when it comes out at about 40p a serving, and you consider the fact that you can get this same amount of tryptophan shown here from 120 grams of cooked chicken, maybe 4 or 5 eggs, and I'm not sure the quantities of beef, but it's going to be, a similar serving. It's probably not worth it. However, if you are plant-based, it might be worth considering, do you have sufficient tryptophan in the diet? And if not, then maybe a supplement, I should say, is an appropriate course of action. So let's move on to the second pathway, which is called the Priess Handler Pathway. Now, the Priess Handler Pathway is another pathway in which NAD+ is synthesized, and it does this from forms of vitamin B3, specifically nicotinic acid. So again, this one, very simply, it's going to come down to diet. Do you have enough B3 in the diet? Well, great sources of this, again, are going to be something like chicken and fish if you are meat-based, and then vegetable or plant-based forms that are going to be useful are going to be mushrooms, avocados, and potatoes. Generally, if you're hitting that protein intake and eating your fruit and veg, you're going to be grand, but considering the addition of a solid B complex would be great here, just as a sort of insurance policy, and generally the B vitamins are just really important. If you do go ahead and get a B complex, consider getting a methylated form. Then we're going to move on to the final pathway, but first we summarize that final step. So we've looked there at two things. We can synthesize NAD+ via two pathways, the de novo synthesis pathway and the Priess Handler pathway. Basically, they rely on sufficient dietary intake of substrates and cofactors, so making sure you have enough protein, and B3 are the main ones, but also enough iron, as that serves as a cofactor for some of the enzymes. Now, another thing we said here is that during high stress and inflammation, both of those processes can get inhibited, basically shut down pretty aggressively. So try and keep that stress low, try and keep that inflammation low. And now we're going to look at the primary pathway, which is called the NAD+ salvage pathway. Okay, so here we have the NAD+ salvage pathway. This is the primary way that the body regenerates NAD+. Now, again, a lot going on, but I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Firstly, this part here, this is what we're really interested in. NAD+ constantly shifts between NAD+ and NADH, so it's reduced and oxidized forms, and that's how it basically provides electrons and energies to your metabolism, in this case the electron transport chain, to generate energy. That's what we want. We want enough NAD+ here so that we can have energy to get all of those benefits. Now, some level of degradation is normal, but under high stress, similar to what we discussed with the Priess Handler and de novo pathways, enzymes such as PARPs, CD38, and sirtuins are going to degrade NAD+ into something called NAM, niacinamide. Now, in an ideal world, this will just be recycled back round into nicotinamide mononucleotide and then back up into NAD+. However, again, unfortunately, if you are stressed, inflamed, or sick, that's when this pathway becomes more of an issue. It's called the NAM sink, where the enzyme NNMT, N-nicotinamide methyltransferase, converts niacinamide into 1-MNA, and it's basically irreversibly lost. So we can no longer recycle it back into NAD+. Let's have a look at the key areas we want to hit in order to support this. Well, firstly, inflammation. Inflammation and stress is going to drive all of these. So you don't really want to be sick and dysfunctional when using a product like NAD+, because it's all going to get wasted anyway. What's even worse is if it is wasted and you end up with these very large pools of 1-MNA, 1-MNA is linked to type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, liver disease, and cancer progression. Now, the first three are probably just the fact that if your metabolism is poor, you're going to be losing more NAD+ down this NAM sink pathway. But the cancer progression, there are some links between 1-MNA and actual cancer metabolism. So you want to make sure that you're introducing these supplements into the right environment in order to stay healthy and get all of the benefits. So now let's have a look at how we can support this. We've got a couple of areas. Now, firstly, direct supplementation. NR and NMN are NAD+ precursors, nicotinamide riboside and nicotinamide mononucleotide. Both of these can be purchased online, and they are pretty effective at increasing NAD+ levels, but they're pretty expensive. And also, again, if the inflammation's not taken care of, they're probably just going to go into NAD+, which will get converted into NAM and then lost down the NAM sink. So these can be amazing in people who are already healthy to improve energy levels, but not ideal for those who are already sick. And that's where really I have to hammer home the fact that a balanced and varied diet, regular exercise, sunlight exposure, good sleep, etc., you can't avoid how important these are, because all of these other things we're discussing really improve that, and without that you're going to really struggle. Now, secondly, you could consider supporting the enzymes that convert this process. So, for example, ginsenoside, so found in ginseng, will improve the conversion of NAM to NMN. So this enzyme right here, this is supported by compounds like ginseng, which is a very common and popular supplement, relatively inexpensive. You can also support this enzyme here, NMNAT, with a compound like resveratrol, which can be very effective, although unfortunately is quite expensive. Where my preferred plan of action or places to attack is actually limiting the breakdown of NAD+ and or the NAM sink. So how would we go about doing that, especially seeing as I said, that's very much my preferred method to go about? Well, that's going to be inhibiting these enzymes here, like PARPS and CD38, and that could be with things like apigenin, is a relatively mild but effective inhibitor of CD38, and one of the most effective ones is 5-amino-1-MQ. So 5-amino-1-MQ is pretty aggressively inhibits NNMT, which is going to stop all of this being broken down there and keep things in circulation. Right, so let's summarize what I just said about the NAD+ salvage pathway and what some of the takeaways for you should be. So diet, exercise, and sleep, these need to be your absolute bedrock. These have to be the foundation. Without this, really, the other compounds struggle to work as well as they can. Secondly, we want to consider stopping the breakdown. So stop the breakdown of NAD+. And how would we do that? Well, that was where we were looking at compounds like apigenin and 5-amino-1-MQ. Apigenin inhibiting CD38, so less NAD plus is lost to NAM, and 5-amino-1-MQ inhibiting NNMT, which is going to stop the breakdown of NAM to 1-MNA. Now, if we have got all of that in order, that's when we could really consider and very much benefit from compounds like nicotinamide riboside, nicotinamide mononucleotide to increase NAD plus levels. Or we could look at things like ginseng or resveratrol to increase the conversions. Now, hopefully you found that really helpful. If you want more of a breakdown on the protocols and the practices that you can put in place, I will be linking my Beehive, which has got all of the basically dosing, things like that that I would recommend. For example, here, apigenin, 50 to 200 milligrams per night in the evening. NMN and NR considered at 500 milligrams or 1000 milligrams are great. 5-amino-1-MQ, I didn't feel comfortable discussing, as it can be an incredible tool, but it's a little bit grey market. And then methylated B vitamins, I think there's loads of good ones, but life extension and pure encapsulations, I think are both great. And then I made some comments as well on the importance of just good exercise. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below. And that is all I had to say. Have a wonderful day, and I can't find my mouse.